Hey, I'm Adam,
I'm Dave.
and you're listening to Fiction
Or nonfiction.
Cue Music. Fiction
Or nonfiction.
Hey, so this is Fiction or Nonfiction, the show where we go through viral news stories, urban legends, and try to determine whether these stories are true or false, whether they are fiction
Oh, I'm supposed to say something. Nonfiction. Or
That-
nonfiction.
or nonfiction. Yeah! So I'm Adam here with Dave, as mentioned, and we have our favorite recurring guest host, by de facto our only recurring guest host, but we have her here, Becky!
Hello.
Hello, Becky. Thanks for joining us once again.
Yes, anytime.
So we've talked about a lot of things here on the show so far. Dave, we've unpacked a lot. We've talked about, so many urban legends. We've talked about food, a lot about food.
Sandwiches. Yeah.
Sandwiches, yes.
Close to lunchtime.
It's because, yeah, that's probably why.
I think that's what we don't know for sure, but we think that's why food always pops up in our episodes.
Well, this episode is going to be about something that's not food necessarily, although some people have probably eaten this. But this is definitely something that's a bit hungry. So here's an urban legend, and I want to just poke your brains first to know.
Poke our brains.
Yeah, just put my finger right between your ear canals
That's
and just
gonna
dig
hurt.
around.
My brain is numbing as we speak. Can you please continue?
So I'm going to talk about a very famous urban legend, one I'm sure you've both heard of before: alligators in the sewers of New York City. So, Becky, being our guest host, what do you know about this urban legend?
I guess I've heard of it, but I don't. I'm trying to remember what I heard. Is it that they're just so large because there's so much stuff in the sewers? I don't know.
There are some ideas about them being mutated. That is a variant of this. Dave, what about you? What do you know about the tale of alligators in the sewers of New York City?
I thought it was just from like cartoons.
I was going to say, is it like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
There was a giant alligator in that cartoon, that's true. Partially inspired by a very famous urban legend. So, I'll give you some background in this, and then
Alright.
I'll pick your brains a little bit more. I'm really into brain poking today. So here's the story, the basic legend of alligators in the sewers of New York City. These are stories of sightings of alligators dating back to the 1920s and early 1930s. This is attributed to baby gators being purchased as pets. And then what happens is that eventually they're released by their owners once they end up being too large for the comfort of the people who originally bought them. And so there's variants of the story about how the alligators end up in the sewer. Sometimes they're just kind of left out in storm drains. And another popular version of this is that the baby gators are flushed down a toilet. And that's how they end up in the New York sewer system.
Oh.
Now, there are variants of this legend that go on to different degrees. Some say that there are giant hordes of alligators in the sewers of New York City. Some say they're a little bit more sparse, but due to contamination, due to the waste matter underneath New York City and Manhattan, that they've actually mutated over time to adapt to this environment, including developing albino skin. As for those details, those are variants of it, but the main urban legend that there are alligators inhabiting the sewers of New York City. Do you believe this is fiction or nonfiction?
I mean, I want to say that it is fiction because where would they go? Maybe that's why, if it's real, I guess that's why you don't go swimming in the Hudson River, but.
Well, I think that and other reasons.
Yeah. This must be fiction. I can't.
So we get a pretty firm fiction from you?
Yeah.
Okay. David, what about you?
I've never looked in a sewer in New York City. And I
You're
don't really
missing out.
I don't really plan to. But I'm going to say it's fiction because I don't know if they could survive.
Okay, so you
In
don't
the
know
sewer.
if they could survive in a sewer. Now, why do you think that is?
Just because of all the waste and everything that is going through there. It's not. I don't know. I'm unsure, but I think it's just an urban legend. I think it's a tall tale, as they say.
As tall as a gator standing from the tip of its tail to the end of its snout.
As tall as the water rising in the sewers of New York City.
Wow, that was very poetic.
I don't know if that happens, but anyways.
Well, there was that flood of the subway system, so I guess technically it did. Okay, so before we get into the investigation and actually uncovering the truthfulness of this urban legend, my question to both of you is, how do you think this story started? What do you think the origin would have been? Because regardless whether it's a true story or just a fictitious tale, it had to begin somewhere.
I feel like it's kind of like one of those other urban legends we were talking about. The reason it originated is because they didn't want people to do something. So maybe they didn't want people to have alligators as pets, which, maybe you really want an alligator as a pet, but it's kind of dangerous. It's not like a dog or even a cat.
So kind of like our tale of the Mexican pet, kind of a warning, hey, don't take this pet over the border. Hey, don't get this exotic animal as a pet.
Yeah, don't have a pet sewer rat.
What about you, Becky? What do you think?
I mean, I'm also wondering if maybe like someone was in the sewers, possibly an employee, and they saw something that was very large, maybe not even a living thing, but something kind of floating on the water that just kind of scared them a little bit, and they thought, wow, that could be an alligator.
Maybe it was a large rat.
Could be a large-scaled rat. Okay, so I'm going to give you a possible origin. And again, this is not definitive, but from what I was able to uncover, the first definitive recorded sighting of alligators was in a book titled The World Beneath the City. This book was by an author named Robert Daly, who detailed the history of the problems involved with the development of the network of utilities beneath Manhattan Island, and of course that includes the sewer system. So, in a chapter entitled Alligators in the Sewers, Daly offered interviews with Teddy May, who had been a commissioner of the sewers in New York City for some 30 years. Now, according to May, again, former commissioner of the sewers in New York City, he said sewer inspectors first reported seeing alligators as far back as 1935, although there was also rumors and speculation going back to the late 1920s. But neither May nor anyone else believed these rumors. However, persistent reports finally caused May to go down himself to find out. And what do you think he saw?
Pile of trash.
Okay, pile of trash. Not a bad idea for in the sewer in New York City. What do you think, Becky?
I mean, maybe some other large floating things, but I don't think they were alligators.
You might be shocked that May actually reported having sighted multiple alligators whose length averaged about 2 feet long.
I don't like that. That's scary.
Now, May actually started using an extermination campaign to flush the beast out of these major systems of the New York sewer network, where hunters with .22 caliber rifles were waiting at the end of these arteries to eliminate these alligators. And then he announced in 1937 publicly that the gators were gone from the sewer system.
Oh, you're asking us if this is true or not?
I was asking you originally, but this is a report from May. Again, this guy, Teddy May, who was the commissioner of sewers for New York City.
This isn't fiction. This is a real report.
How much do you believe May, though? That's my next question.
It seems a bit it seems like parts of it could be true, but I don't know.
I mean, you said this is in 1935? Like,
Yep.
What was plumbing like? Like, how?
Just a hole in the ground.
Like, I'm just wondering, like, how they got there and, yeah, how they survived and really 2 feet, that's not that big, right?
Like, and like, were they coming up through the sewer system in people's bathrooms or?
No, this was just reported from workers in the sewer systems. Now, with this said, I do want to point out one thing here. This story gained a lot of traction due to the publication of this book, but it should be noted that there was no actual physical evidence offered of these sewer-dwelling reptiles, and there was neither photographic evidence nor remains of the alligators offered as proof of their existence through May or through any other employee of New York City.
So he just said he went gator hunting. We don't know what came out of the gator hunt.
That is what May did say, but who knows? Because nothing was offered as proof. However, this rumor gained a lot of traction after the publication of this book, in addition to rumors that were just kind of circulated around the area for years. One of the most popular reported gator sightings actually occurred in 1932. In that time, the police mobilized a hunt in Westchester County, which is just north of New York City, after 2 boys brought in a 3-foot dead alligator and claimed that the Bronx River was swarming with live ones.
What?
What are we supposed to do with this information?
Well, again, I think at this point we have to put on our information literacy hats and start unpacking to figure out, is this true or not? So we have boys bringing in the carcass of this alligator, so we have some physical proof that there is an alligator.
Right.
Is there anything that seems suspect about this at all?
Well, it's not specifically mentioned that they're from the sewer.
In fact, the boys referenced directly the Bronx River.
It's more likely that they would be in a river than in a sewer.
Mm-hmm.
Even though that's still kind of odd in New York.
And I mean, I'm wondering how old were these boys? How did the alligator die?
Yeah, I looked at the reports of this, and apparently the boys were trying to coax it out from what they claimed was a storm drain. And in that point, when the gator went for them, they killed it with a shovel.
Oh, a 3-foot alligator.
A 3-foot alligator.
Huh.
Now, with that said, this is what these children said, bringing in this dead gator. There's no follow-up reports about any other sightings of alligators in the Bronx River, in spite of what the boys said. And as I mentioned, there was a little bit of a vogue period where people could actually mail order baby gators. And so they kind of became these exotic pets that were very popular in the 1930s. And I guess it is possible one of them may have escaped its habitation. But that explains one single gator. We don't even have proof that the boys actually found it by a storm drain. We just have them bringing in the carcass, and that's it.
Because I guess that's what I was going to ask too, was where is this alligator fad coming from? Like, I just kind of assumed it would be more difficult to get an alligator, but...
This comes in the mail.
It just comes in the mail, apparently. Yeah, so there was an investigation that was done, and this was actually a pretty recent article that was published in the New York Times in February 26, 2020. The article was titled, "The Truth About Alligators in the Sewers of New York." And the author, his name is Corey Kilgannon. He said that these tales are sort of true.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So definitely there have been reports for a long time about alligators being former pets and being abandoned, and they have to be rescued. What's interesting, though, is that the city of New York does report annually that they do need to save alligators, abandoned pet alligators, but not from the sewer systems.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Where do they save them from?
Most cases involve alligators being rescued above ground, usually within park areas, perhaps public pools, or just in apartment buildings where they escape the habitation of whoever was illegally owning them. And that's something else to note. I don't have the exact date, but for decades, owning alligators as pets in New York City has been illegal.
Okay, and is it's still pretty popular for people to have alligators as pets?
Apparently it is. There's some other reports I have here. The most recent sighting I could find was in 2010, where there was an alligator spotted under a car in Astoria.
Like, that's my nightmare. Like, just walking down the sidewalk and, oh, there's an alligator.
It might not bite you, though.
I might be more freaked out about you.
It might just run away.
I guess.
Or towards you.
Or towards you, depending how hungry it is. So you did ask, how did the gator fad get so popular? There were advertisements for purchasing baby alligators by mail, and it was very common, including in Popular Mechanics magazine. So there's also tales of vacationers traveling to Florida, and they would bring back these little reptiles as souvenirs, and then eventually the pets would be abandoned once they got too big. At this point, we do have evidence that there's alligators abandoned in New York City, and apparently every year there are reports about city staff that have to rescue these abandoned alligators. At this point, I should just ask as an aside, have any of you, either of you, eaten alligator before?
No.
I did see alligator for sale in a grocery store. That was disturbing.
Mm-hmm.
I know that in like different parts of the U.S. they do serve it. Like you can order alligator in certain places.
Prior to my vegetarian shift in lifestyle, I actually did eat some alligator when I visited New Orleans.
And was it chewy or what did it taste like?
It was okay. It was like subpar chicken.
Okay.
Like fishy chicken?
A
Because I've
little
had
bit,
snake
yeah.
before.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's a good description. What I do want to say, though, with all of this, we have maybe some past precedent to say, okay, there are alligators that have been rescued in New York City, and maybe there are even some located by a sewer drain, but are there actively, in this day and age, alligators inhabiting the sewers of New York City? Now, you both gave an answer prior to this information. How are you feeling now about this?
I mean, even though there have been, like, there was the 2020 article that had there was some legitimacy to it. If there are alligators in the sewer, don't you think that there would be some sort of a like hazard related to sewer workers and like you would think that the city would say something, right? Where they're like, "Hey, we have seen alligators in the sewers, so just as like an extra precaution, like don't go into the sewers. You shouldn't be going anyway if you're not working in them." But
that makes sense to me. Dave, what do you think?
I don't think that there's tons of alligators living in the sewers either.
Maybe ounces?
No.
Oh.
But I think that it is possible that there are some that, according to what you've told us, there are some that pop up from time to time.
Mm-hmm. This is reiterated from that article I was describing from 2020, but this references a 1982 column also in the New York Times where a New York City sewer chief named John T. Flattery was actually interviewed about this topic, and he verified that neither himself nor any of his employees have cited any alligators during the term of his employment. Flaherty also stated that alligators would likely succumb to the volume of water that's flushed through the mains during heavy rainfalls, or would probably die due to an inadequate food source because you're dealing with stuff that's contaminated through wastewater and fecal matter that's floating around. So this is also reiterated by a lot of scientists and people who are herpetologists, who, as we all know, study reptiles, and they said it just would not allow a hospitable environment for alligators to live. So even if an alligator was somehow down there, it wouldn't survive long because the sewers would be too cold and toxic for it to live probably past a few days. Also, the reports about mutant alligators, albino alligators, there's no evidence of that. That's apparently all hearsay. There's been no documentation of that. Okay. So this apparently is fiction. So at this point, there are no alligators in the sewers of New York City. As for the other alligator rescues, the past couple of decades have seen New York with sporadic street-level sightings and rescues of alligators. Prominent ones include the 2010 incident that I referred to. Other ones included a 4-foot gator being pulled out of a lake in Queens in 1997, a 2-foot-long caiman caught in Central Park in 2001, and a 3-foot gator found by a dog walker in Queens in 2003. Again, these were all cases where these were animals that were being illegally either transferred or kept as exotic pets in the city and somehow escaped. In none of these cases could the authorities confirm that these reptiles came out of the sewer, and there was no evidence of that. But this is a popular myth. In fact, it's spawned a number of hoaxes, tributes, and art projects, and it's even become an unofficial holiday in New York City, Alligator in the Sewer Day, in February.
What do you do on that day?
I think you eat raw sewage.
Okay, well, all of this talk about alligators and sewers and radioactivity makes me think of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Mm-hmm. And there was a character called Leatherhead in that cartoon and also in the comic book that it was based off of, who was a giant alligator living in the sewers of New York City. In fact, that was the direct inspiration for that character, but also these Ninja Turtles inhabiting the sewers of New York City was also directly inspired by this urban legend. So we have a little bit of a connection there.
So there's no alligators in the sewers, but we do not know if the Ninja Turtles are in the sewers.
Or giant martial arts trained rats. We don't know about that either.
See, that I believe.
You saw a documentary about it one time, didn't you?
No.
Yeah, back in 1990.
No.
Now that you know about these alligators, we can continue to use the washroom in peace. Dave, do I smell not raw sewage, but is that a random Dave fact?
Sure is. It's another random fact. I'm going to try and keep this one short and brief. So we're going to talk about it. You guessed it. Parking meters. Okay? Parking meters were first invented
I should have had a parking meter trigger warning. I'm sorry.
Parking meters were first invented in 1930.
Wow, what
Is this
a-
fiction or nonfiction?
Well, you said it's a fact, so it's true.
It's not true. It is not.
Then you lied to me.
It is fictional. Because the parking meter was invented in 1932, and the first one was installed in July of 1935 in Oklahoma City. And if you want to know a little bit more information, because I know everyone wants to know about parking meters,
In this city, we sure do.
we have American journalist Carlton McGee to thank for this invention.
That's a made-up name.
That's what it says in this book I'm reading.
It's the Book of Inventions, How'd They Come Up With That, by Ian Harrison.
For?
And it's published by National Geographic, of course.
Yes. So the idea came because there was a problem. In the 1930s in Oklahoma, workers were arriving early and leaving their cars on the streets all day, preventing people from shopping, parking, and really just going places and doing things. They would just park their cars and leave them there. So they came up with this idea to introduce parking meters, and they introduced 150 parking meters in Oklahoma City in July of 35. They were called the Park-O-meters. And
You ever notice at that time, everything was the O, whatever, it was the laundromatic, the
Yeah.
parkometer.
yeah, I don't know why. Because it was exciting. It was so exciting.
Oh my god.
And but if you do borrow this book, you can find out some information about it. Australia's first parking meter followed in 1955.
And then it was hit by an armadillo and it toppled over.
And I think that's enough for the parking meter facts of this show. There is more information, as mentioned, in this great book. Lots of other inventions in here as well.
Including the invention of grilled cheese.
Thanks, Becky, for joining us again. You're our most popular guest host, and we really love it when you're on the show.
Well, that's good to hear.
Thanks for joining us on Fiction or
Nonfiction. Thank you so much for that information, and we're going to be back. We're going to be sharing some more information, sussing out the truth or the unreality of some other stories. Make sure that you visit windsorpubliclibrary.com to get more great information and to perform research. Until then, I'm Adam,
I'm Dave
and this has been Fiction
or Nonfiction.